Alright, pure golfers, we've got the swing here of Conor Peal. Conor Peal's a amateur golfer out of New York City. It looks like he's hitting at one of the ranges, probably on Long Island or just outside the city. But we're taking a look at his swing. He plays about 10 rounds a year, but he was an accomplished junior golfer as an amateur. I think maybe even winning a club championship. He played high school golf. But we're taking a look at his setup. So I've got two lines drawn, the green lines on both hips, and then I've got a straight line going down the center of his shoulders at 180 degrees, and then a bent line, this yellow line, shows kind of the tilt of his upper body at address. So that's one of the things I'm looking at. Conor says that this is a 6-iron. So he's got about 6 degrees of tilt, maybe a little bit more at address. And then he's got his hands pressed, a little bit towards his left thigh. That would be, the hallmark of a low core player. To have your hands pressed like that. And I'm specifically talking about David Wright and E.A. Tischler's kind of research of this bit of, a mid-core and upper core and a low-core player, rotational rates of the hips, and the ways that they post either on their left side or their right leg. And I think you can pretty much see that Conor is kind of a back leg poster. And you can kind of see that as he takes it back. So he's going to take it back, and you're going to see that shift right away kind of onto the trail leg. This seems to me to be a little bit more reminiscent of like a Henrik Stenson than maybe like a Patrick Reed or a Phil Mickelson, who may be posting more on their lead leg, or even different than like a Rory McIlroy or a Jason Day, who are going to stay pretty centered. I would say Conor kind of floats between the centered pivot and kind of posting onto his trail leg at the top. So let's take it back. Pretty tidy here with his takeaway. I like the folding rates of his arms and things that we can see from the face-on view. And then he's going to get to the top, and you can see just how much his head has moved behind that original wall that it was on. So you can see that line's pretty much on his left eye at address, and he's going to come back and he's going to move his entire head off of that wall. So you can see his pivot is really, it's almost moves to being over the trail leg. And then as Conor starts to come down, he rotates pretty well, and he has, he moves those hips forward, and he has pretty good rotation. You can see as he gets to maybe a little bit short or a little bit past position 6, he's got, his hands on the right quad, and then as he moves into the golf ball, he gets his hands on the left shoe at impact, and that's pretty good. This is a 6-iron. He maybe has a little bit of interesting extension of the right arm as he's moving through, but for the most part, for somebody who plays 10 rounds a year, it looks like he's a pretty pure ball striker, at least in this video of this move. So there's Conor at address. His hands are forward, they're pointed at his left hip, is kind of where the shaft is pointed, and he's going to move him back, and you can see his head move off that wall, and then he's going to sit down into his right leg and move the head and keep that head behind that wall and let his hips turn. Conor's big complaint, at least on talking to him briefly on the phone, was that his ball flight was a little bit too high, and he said, Conor has an English accent, but basically he said, I'm not sure if I just wasn't used to seeing the ball fly because I never get to play anymore living in the city, or if I actually was hitting it too high. I would have to think that his dynamic loft is probably pretty good, looking at that impact position right there, and seeing, you know, his hips are open, although it's possible, you know, when we look at down the line view, that that maybe his shoulders aren't open enough. But from a face-on view, I don't see a tremendous amount that I don't like, and I think that if you look at kind of a Stenson model of having a, you know, post on the trail leg, that you know, this is pretty good. And you look at Stenson, you know, one of the great ball strikers, and some of the other kind of trail leg posters like a Jordan Spieth or a Dustin Johnson, if you believe the kind of the stuff that that David Wright's talking about, which I think is pretty solid. It's pretty interesting stuff. So I think Conor's move looks pretty good from face on. Maybe the only thing is when he's taking it back, you can see there is quite a bit of shift, and I don't see a ton of extension in his back at the top of the backswing. So I'm going to take away these lines and just kind of explain what I'm talking about. So I'm going to put a line on Conor's head. Now most people have some pivot problems, and Conor really doesn't. But as he comes back, he actually does go down just a little bit in the backswing with his hips pretty level. So you can see his hips are pretty level, which I like. But I'd like to see his head kind of stay on that line. So a way he could do that is, as he gets to the top of the backswing, feel like his head is actually going towards the target a little bit, or have some extension in his back. You know, he starts out with his back sort of rolled, and if when he got to about here, he started to feel that back extending, he might find just a little bit different pattern. But that's just something he'd have to experiment with, and then with how little Conor's able to play, I'm not sure it's worth messing with. So, you know, as we look at Conor there, you know, he's got his head pretty far behind the golf ball at impact, which allows him to do some nice things. And, you know, the only other thing I'm going to take a look at from the face-on view is just how straight that right arm is at impact, and it could just be an optical illusion with that sweater, but we'll take a look at it. So pretty tidy from Conor Peal.